Welcome to Brave Conversations, where real stories lead to brave moves. I'm Barbie Armenta, storyteller, speaker, realtor, and guide for women navigating midlife transitions. If you're standing at a crossroads, wondering what's next, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Brave Conversations. I have a confession to make. By the time that Richard and I were looking for a house together, I'd moved so many times, I kind of had a system. I would get on realtor.com, search the neighborhood, look at the photos, and then I'd feel it in my gut. And when something looked right, I trusted that feeling. What I did not expect was that the house I found online, the one that looked perfect, would turn out to be next door to my best friend. I didn't plan that. I didn't search for it. That's just God showing off. But before we get to the Flower Mound house, I need to tell you what it took to get there. Because this episode is not just about a house. It's about a woman who had been through enough to finally stop trusting her own instincts and start trusting God's. That's a bigger shift than it sounds. Let me take you back for a moment. I was 21 when I got married the first time because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I found a man with a house and a dog and the right checklist, and I said yes. The second time, I was drawn by loneliness and the hope of memory of country dancing and a blue shirt. I wanted a family again. I wanted safety, and I signed on too fast. Both times, I was choosing with my eyes what looked right, what felt stable, what filled the emptiness. And by the time I was sitting across from Richard, this amazing, loud, handsome, steady man who was not in a hurry, I realized I did not trust my own judgment about love. Not because I was broken, but because I had learned something true about myself. When I was desperate, I settled. When I was afraid, I rushed. When I was lonely, I called it love. And I didn't want to do that again. So this time I did something different. I prayed. Not the desperate kind of praying, please God, just let it work out this time, but the surrendered kind. Whatever you want, God, whatever you choose, I trust you. I let go of the timeline. I let go of the checklist. I let go of what my girlfriends thought and what made sense on paper. And I watched how Richard treated his daughter with intentionality. I watched how he showed up for my boys, not performing, just present. I watched how he handled the hard conversations, calm, where other men in my life had not been. I watched how he prayed like someone who actually believed that God was listening. And slowly, without me forcing it, I knew this was different. Not because it looked perfect, but because it was built right. We started looking for a house in Flower Mound, and we wanted to rent first, get in the same space together before the wedding, let the boys adjust, let his daughter have a place that felt like hers too. I found one online that looked perfect, and I did what I always do. I went to look at it. When I pulled up on the street, my best friend lived next door. I called her immediately. She didn't even know that the house was for rent because of course, that's how God does it. Not with a dramatic sign or a burning bush, just a house on a street in Flower Mound right next to the woman who had been in my corner through all of it. I said yes before we even walked inside. The boys and I moved in a few months before the wedding, and I want to talk about that season, those months before Richard officially moved in, because I think it's an important part of the story, because it would have been easy to rush, to just get married and figure it out, but we were intentional. We let the boys settle into the house first. We let them have it as their space before it became everyone's. We gave them time to just adjust to the neighborhood, the school, the new rhythms, before adding the complexity of blending. And that mattered, because blending is real work. It's not just logistics, it's identity work. It's learning to share the space with people who have their own ways, their own histories, their own needs. And doing it slowly made all the difference. After the wedding, Richard moved in and his daughter was with us part-time. And I want to be honest, blending is beautiful and it's hard. There are moments of grace, there's moments of frictions, there's moments where everything clicks and moments where you realize just how different two people's lives have been. Richard had a very close relationship to his daughter, and that closeness was one of the things I love most about him. And she and the boys, they figured it out imperfectly, sometimes noisily, but genuinely. And Richard, with my boys, he showed up every day, not because he had to, but because he had already decided before we got married that he was choosing them too. And that's the kind of love that changes a family. I've lived in a lot of houses, 9 at this point. From a little cottage in Arlington to a custom build in Southlake to the Port Swing in Savannah to that rental in Lantana, each one held a different season. Each one marked a transition, and each one reflected something about who I was in that moment or who I was becoming. But this house in Flower Mound, this one felt different. Not just because it was beautiful, not because it was the biggest, but because for the first time, I wasn't building a home out of hope alone. I was building it out of choice. It was prayed over, God-directed choice. Richard, my boys, his daughter, a neighborhood where my best friend lived next door, a season where everything I'd survived finally started to make sense. But here's what I want you to hear, because this is the thing I most want to say to women who are where I once was. The moves that we make are never just about the real estate. Every time I packed a box, I was navigating a transition. Every time I found a new house, I was stepping into a new version of myself. And every time I drove away from a place I had loved, I was trusting that God's story for me wasn't finished. And He wasn't finished. He never is finished. The abundant life that Jesus talks about in John 10:10 is not a life without pain or loss or hard seasons. It's a life that keeps becoming, a life that keeps finding beauty in unexpected places, a life that keeps moving forward even when you're scared, even when you're grieving, even when you can't see what's coming next. That's what brave moves look like. Not fearlessness, faithfulness. Trusting that God who held you in the hard chapters is the same God writing the good ones. My story isn't over, and neither is yours. There is still a porch swing out there with your name on it. There is still a neighborhood full of people who will become your people. There is still a chapter being written that you haven't read yet. The brave move isn't always the dramatic one. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to trust again, to try again, to let someone in again, to believe against all evidence of the hard years that something good is still possible. Because it is, I promise you, it is. Mine and Richard's story continues in an 80-year-old fixer-upper in Fort Worth, so stay tuned.